Have you been wanting to make the switch from epoxy to Crystalac, or maybe you just heard about Crystalac but are still a little bit nervous to dive in? Today I want to go through some of the major differences between Crystalac and epoxy for tumblers. I want to go through some of the common misconceptions, some that I thought were true before I made the switch, as well as just go into my story a little bit to tell you what ultimately made me decide to make the switch 2 years ago and why I haven't looked back. If you're new here, my name is Allison, and here every single week I post a new tumbler tutorial as well as do a weekly live stream demo so you can become a more confident tumbler maker. If that sounds like something you're interested in, consider hitting that subscribe button down below, and if you click the bell, you will get notified anytime I post a new tutorial. First and foremost, I want to make sure that there is absolutely no negativity, no shame, no nothing, no judgment towards anybody who uses resin for their tumblers. There are amazingly talented resin artists out there, and they make beautiful pieces. I just want to put out there my personal experience, why I can no longer use it, and why using Crystalac was just a better decision for me and my family, and it might be for you too. You don't know what you don't know, and the more information you have, the better you can feel about a decision moving forward. When I started making acrylic keychains several years ago, I just didn't know how toxic the epoxy was. I thought I read the labels and I was being careful, but it turns out that epoxy part A and part B separately are non-toxic. And that's why all the labels, when it's sold to you, say that it's non-toxic. But once you mix them together, a chemical reaction happens, and then the fumes are let off during that process. Those fumes are dangerous, and those are what can cause serious allergic reactions. And especially more and more over time, the more you use it, the more likely you're gonna have an allergic reaction. And you can take all of the precautions you're supposed to take and still develop reactions. I thought that I was using the non-toxic kind and the one that I could use in my house, and I read all the labels and I thought I did all the things, and I ended up getting to a point where I was getting horrible migraines, as well as having trouble breathing. So soon after these symptoms started coming on, I obviously realized it was my resin doing this, and I was looking for an alternative. I love making things. I love creating things. I just didn't have the space in my house, the ventilation, the ability to go away from my family. I didn't have that option, so I had to find something else. I joined Epoxy Is Not My Friend on Facebook. And there are a ton of people in the same boat, right? A ton of people are developing these reactions. They're going to the hospital. Like, thankfully, mine was just a migraine, right? People were ending up in the hospital. People's dogs are going to the hospital, right? It was just so much more serious than I ever thought that it was. And I was thankful to find that group, because not only in that group can you find recommendations for being as safe as possible with using resin if you want to still use resin, I was also just able to connect with other people who were going through the same thing I was. Around that same time was when the Crystalac company kind of got discovered to being used for tumblers, right? The Crystalac company has actually been around for over 40 years, which, helped me understand that this is not just like a new pop-up company. People are using it. Like, this product has been used for over 40 years and no allergic reactions have ever been reported. So that just gave me a little bit of peace of mind knowing that it's not just something that people started using. It is a product that has been around for a really long time. So I'm going to go through a few differences between epoxy and Crystalac, but I'm also going to link a video right here that goes into a little bit more detail on that piece specifically. The first main difference between epoxy and Crystalac is mixing. For resin, it is a two-part resin. You have to mix part A and part B and mix them together for them to cure. Crystalac comes in a container and it is ready to use. You do not have to mix it. You can just use it right from the container, and it cures by evaporation. So there's no chemical process happening. It's just truly the water evaporating out, and that's the whole process. So with resin, you're mixing. With Crystalac, you are not mixing. Second difference that I want to highlight is the thickness of coats. If you're doing like a 20-ounce tumbler, each coat of epoxy is going to be about 20 milliliters, give or take. So you're using a lot of epoxy on each coat, but you only need a couple of coats, right? You're only going to do like 3 or 4 coats for your entire tumbler. Crystalac products are not solvent-based, so they have to be put on thin. They are not a deep pour product, so you have to do several thin coats. Each coat of Crystalac is about 2 milliliters. So you're using more coats, but you're using less volume throughout the whole process. So with epoxy, you're putting on a handful of thick coats. With Crystalac, you're putting on several thin coats, but you'll both get to that super shiny, awesome finish in the end. Main difference number 3 is the writing process. When you create pieces of art, you're always using different mediums, and each one of those has a different set of conditions for drying and curing and just the way you handle it. So resin is different from Crystalac. The drying and waiting process is different between the two. It's hard to do like A to B comparison because even within the realm of epoxy, there's different brands and different speeds in which they dry. So like you just have to make sure you know what you're using and how long to let it dry. With Crystalac products, you can let each coat dry for 4 hours and then you can recoat. So you can do a new coat of Bright Tone, Crystalac Bright Tone on your tumbler every 4 hours. That brings us into misconception number 1 that sort of holds people back from making the switch. And that misconception that it takes significantly longer to do a cup using Crystalac. Now, for some people, that might be true, but a lot of people, it isn't. Now, it really depends on what your schedule was while you were using resin and what it can be while using Crystalac. There's no set like amount of time it takes somebody to make a tumbler. I know for me personally, when I was doing epoxy stuff, I had to be at a point where my kids were sleeping or away or doing something else. So like I couldn't do it any part of the day. I could only do it at very specific times. So it took me a really long time to get my tumblers done. With Crystalac, I can easily go and put on a coat on my tumblers in about a minute. So I can just run in the room, do my coats, and run out. So it tends to take about the same amount of time for me to finish tumblers. And a lot of people find that it is a very similar time frame, maybe a couple days longer with Crystalac, but it's not a significant difference that should keep you from switching if you really are interested in making the switch. Second misconception is that Crystalac is not as shiny, and that's just not true. I can show you several tumblers from my own to my friends that make amazingly shiny tumblers, and if you are seeing tumblers that are not super shiny, it's because that person didn't get them super shiny, right? Everybody is at a different place in their tumbler journey, and some people make better tumblers at this point than others. So just know that it is absolutely 100% possible to make a shiny, shiny tumbler. Misconception number 3 is that you can't do certain designs, right? Maybe you're used to doing certain things with resin, or you see other resin tumblers and you're like, well, I can't do that with Crystalac. Now, I want to say in the 2.5 years that I have been using Crystalac products, there is yet to be a tumbler that I cannot recreate, or I've yet to see somebody not figure out how to recreate them. There may be a little bit of a different process involved when you're using Crystalac. You may have to use different materials, but you can recreate any type of resin tumbler using Crystalac. There is no barrier for holding you back, so you can't make whatever it is that you want to make. And misconception number 4 is that it's too hard to learn. It is a learning process, and it does take time and practice to get to that point where you feel super confident with your tumblers, but anybody can learn. If you're feeling like you need a little extra support during the learning process, make sure you join my Tumbler Maker Academy, where I teach students just like you exactly how to make glitter tumblers using Crystalac products. I'm going to put a link up on the screen as well as in the description box below. We are launching very, very soon, depending on when you're watching this video. You can either get on the waitlist or join us now. I'm gonna also pull up a playlist of all of my best beginner tumbler tutorials if you're interested in continuing to learn here on YouTube.